Joining us on stage, Bishop Stephen Dami Mamza. Bishop Mamza was appointed Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Yola, Nigeria in 2011. Only a few short years later, he was called upon to lead a larger flock than he ever expected.
Today, I want to share my personal experience as a bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Yola in northeast Nigeria. In Yola, we have turned a community devastated by the violence of Boko Haram into a laboratory of Muslim-Christian cooperation. Our experience shows how faith, when lived generously, can rebuild trust, even in places where extremists try to destroy it. Boko Haram emerged in the early 2000s in northeast Nigeria as a radical Islamist movement, rejecting Western-style education, the secular state, and religious pluralism. Over time, it evolved into a violent insurgency targeting Christians, moderate Muslims, traditional rulers, schools, market, and state institutions. This violence has not only killed and displaced thousands, it has poisoned trust between communities. Christians often felt they were targeted for their faith. Muslims often felt collectively blamed for crimes they did not commit. In the mixed communities of northeast Nigeria, neighbors who once lived side by side began to fear one another. Suspicion seeped into everyday life. This breakdown of trust is exactly what groups like Boko Haram seek to turn religious difference into permanent hostility, making peaceful existence seem impossible. When Boko Haram overran parts of Adamawa State in 2014, thousands fled into Yola from northern Adamawa and southern neighboring Borno State. Many arrived with nothing and no family networks to receive them. The Catholic Cathedral of St. Teresa's in Yola became an impromptu sanctuary. I closed down all our schools and used every available space to accommodate about 40,000 people. Christians and Muslims slept side by side in the cathedral compound with no distinction made in who received food or shelter. From 2014 to 2019, the diocese, with support from various organizations, took responsibility for feeding, sheltering, and providing basic health care for these internally displaced persons. As international and local support later declined, I recognized that life in a camp could not be the final answer. People needed dignity, permanence, and community, not just charity. To create a durable solution, I sought land and decided to build permanent homes for the IDPs. With support from partners like Missio in Germany and others, the diocese constructed the Salama Housing Estate. The project has 86 homes, now hosting about 850 people, Christians and Muslims together, with no one excluded on religious ground. The estate includes a church, a school, and a clinic. And later, to ensure freedom of religion and worship, I decided to address the spiritual needs of Muslims by building a mosque using funds from my own diocese. For this decision, I faced criticism from some Christians who opposed a bishop building a mosque, and from some Muslims who argued that Muslims should not worship in a mosque built by a Christian. Nonetheless, I did not let the critics stop me from doing what I knew was the right thing to do. One community, equal dignity, and shared services. Education has been made compulsory for all children in the housing estate. Education there is both humanitarian assistance and a deliberate counter to the ideological roots of Boko Haram. Today, we have a thriving community where Muslims and Christians live side by side in peace. You might ask, how did we build such a community out of such great tragedy? My answer is threefold. One, through shared suffering. Christians and Muslims first lived as equal victims under the same roof at the cathedral, building solidarity in crisis. Two, through shared neighborhood. At Salama Housing, they own homes in the same estate, share schools, water points, health centers, and markets. Finally, through shared respect for freedom of religion or belief. A church and a mosque exist side by side, each respected, both seen as part of one community's fabric. Yola stands in direct contrast to Boko Haram's narrative, where the insurgency tried to make Christians and Muslims enemies. My community rejected this ideology by building a mosque for our Muslim neighbors. My goal was to send a concrete message. Your rights as Muslims are protected even by a Christian leader. In Yola, educational and humanitarian support is provided without discrimination. Food distributions, housing, and scholarships are not conditioned on conversion or religious alliance. When a Christian bishop defends Muslims' rights and Muslim leaders reciprocate, they model the kind of inclusive citizenship that extremist groups like Boko Haram cannot co-opt. The story of Yola shows that interreligious dialogue is not an abstract theory. It is a shared roof, a shared classroom, a shared future. Boko Haram tried to make religion a line of war. Community like mine shows that faith can instead draw that line around a common humanity. Thank you.
Welcome to the stage our panel for Fleeing for Faith, Protecting Freedom of Belief for People on the Move. Moderator, Vice President, U.S. Policy and Advocacy, HIAS, Naomi Steinberg. Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, United Nations, Nazila Ganea. Investigative journalist, founder and president, A Demand for Action, Nuri Kino. Senior Fellow at the Berkeley Center, Georgetown University, Catherine Marshall.
Good morning, everyone. We're just going to jump right in. This first question is for Catherine. We know that the intersection between religious persecution and forced displacement is a foundational part of the International Refugee Protection Framework, with persecution or fear of persecution based on one's religion one of the 5 categories that helps to determine if one qualifies for refugee status. While we don't know how many people are on the move exactly because of persecution based on religion, we know that it's happening all around the world, from China to Iran to Myanmar to Nigeria. So with that said, while the number of forcibly displaced people continues to be on the rise, the number of options for protection for them are shrinking. For example, there was an abrupt halt to the U.S. refugee resettlement program with no carve-out for religious minorities, and other countries around the world are also starting to turn their backs more and more on welcome. So with all of that said, can you talk to us a little bit about why it is imperative for people who are displaced because of religious persecution to be able to migrate, to be able to be welcomed through programs such as refugee resettlement? Why is that so important in 2026?
Well, thank you. I think what we desperately need in the current situation is prophetic voices that bring both a vision, but also a solid grounding in some of the realities. And the realities are complicated when you look at migration, because migration, we know, is beneficial in the long term. It's been happening for all of human history. It's part of our story. And it's beneficial in the long term. One study says that 83% of citizens benefit from migration overall. And yet we know it's difficult to manage in the short term. And the same is true of plural societies. We know diversity, from biology to social to political, is enriching, is essential to creativity and to change over time. And yet it is hard to manage in the short term. So this, I think, is where we desperately need both the moral but also the practical voices of our religious leaders. Now, on the refugee issue, the facts are very startling that among the 117 people estimated to be on the move, and you're absolutely right, we don't really know the numbers, It's worth remembering where most of them are, which is internally displaced in their own countries. And the vast majority of others are in countries, neighboring countries, Uganda, Bangladesh, so many other countries that are barely able to support them. Very few are in third country resettlement. So that, I think, puts a special burden on all of us who are able. And the other fact that is important to keep in mind is what we call the protracted refugee situation. 2/3 of people who count as refugees have been there for more than 5 years, some for decades. So what does that point to? I think that points to the urgent need to settle the conflicts, to resolve the issues that are causing people to be forced to leave from their home involuntarily as opposed to seeking excitement and a better life.
Thank you. It's a perfect transition to you, Naz, because you mentioned, Catherine, IDPs, internally displaced people. And Naz, you recently released a report about freedom of religion or belief for people on the move. And I was wondering if you could talk with us a little bit about those who have been forced to make the almost impossible choice to leave behind everything that they know in search of safety and security, and how the issue of religious freedom impacts their lives depending on the context in which they find themselves, whether it's a refugee camp, an urban refugee setting, or a settlement for internally displaced people.
So, thank you. Thanks for that opportunity. In the report to the General Assembly, AAT 205, from last October, I actually expanded that. So people on the move, I also included migrant workers and members of their family. So clearly there's a difference between those that are forced to leave their countries or forced to leave their homes, perhaps as internally displaced, and then as asylum seekers and refugees. And there is a distinction with those that choose to, although, you know, socioeconomic realities might mean that they really are obliged to move as migrants to other countries. But the reason I brought them together under the label of people on the move is that in all of these circumstances, whether voluntary or involuntary or something in between, we neglect the importance of freedom of religion or belief to their lives, and we don't facilitate it. Even in contexts where we are in charge of the whole environment, so IDP camps and refugee camps, yes, we prioritize shelter, food, education, health, and those are hugely important. But why do we devalue the importance of freedom of religion or belief to someone who has been removed from their context, from their network, from their community, from what has given them over time solace? They're in a whole new environment with the uncertainty of, on average, 10 years before people are resettled, and in some instances, decades. So, you know, your child's whole education has been spent in limbo, either in the IDP camp or in the refugee camp, or waiting for resettlement. Why do we devalue it? Certainly, freedom of religion or belief, you know, people might be in a context where they want to search more, they want to find meaning, they want to find calm and solace. They might want to explore other religions or beliefs. So it's really nonsensical that we haven't highlighted the importance of facilitating, providing, and positive obligations for provision of freedom of religion or belief in, you know, and truly freedom, including change and exploration at this time of great tumult in their lives.
I think you've raised some really important points, and I just want to also add that it's not just about freedom of religion for people who are on the move. It's about the role that religion plays in helping to support those who are on the move. So, for example, HIAS, the International Jewish Humanitarian Refugee Organization, we serve refugees and those on the move all around the world from a faith-based perspective, regardless of the faith of the people with whom we're working. It is just a cornerstone to how people respond to forced migration around the world. The faith-based component is foundational. So, Nuri, we're going to take this in a little bit of a different direction. You have your own story of being forced to flee, of seeking refuge, as well as years and years of experience being on the ground with communities that have been forced to flee. So that helps you, I think, be the perfect person to really personalize what we're talking about. We've been speaking at a pretty high level, and I'm wondering if you could tell us a couple of stories about your interactions with people who have been forced to flee because of their faith.
I was abducted when I was 3. My parents then made a courageous decision to flee the country. When I was 5, my sister and I arrived in Germany. And for the first couple of months, we lived in a car garage. My life has been full of trauma, but also fighting spirit and love for our fellow human beings. When I was 8 in Sweden, my mother taught my sister and me to work as professional cleaners. We helped her clean nightclubs and restaurants at night and delivered newspapers early in the morning. We needed every penny to send money back home and help family members and relatives escape persecution, and also to start a new life in our new home country. This is far from a unique or particularly harsh refugee story. Today, I wear black for all the children who at this very moment are forced to flee to survive. As I also wear it for my fellow Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac people who are scattered around the world, for Armenians, for those in Iran, those in Ukraine, for minorities and indigenous peoples in Syria, for Christians in Nigeria, and for all other persecuted children, no matter their ethnicity or religion. I have carefully considered which of hundreds, if not thousands, of refugee children I should mention today. These are children I have met across several continents and countries, children exploited by pedophile networks, children who drowned while fleeing, children left physically and psychologically scarred by war and persecution. They are all worthy of being remembered. I carry faces, names, and tragic destinies with me. I was going to tell you the story of the boy I met in Beirut who fled Nineveh in Iraq. He had burn scars all over his face and his arms. He had tried to stop his mother from being burned alive after terrorists set her on fire. He could not. She died. But then I realized that happened more than 10 years ago. Instead, today, I have chosen a recent case, one that broke my heart. It is a case my organization, A Demand for Action, ADFA, is fighting for right now in Sweden. On December 14, 2025, a church leader called me from a small city. She was devastated. A 19-year-old Iraqi Christian boy had been detained by the Swedish police at his high school and was about to be forcibly deported to Iraq. Matthias was 9 years old when his father climbed to the roof of their home in Nineveh in Iraq, where families often sleep during the summer, and told them it was time to flee. ISIS was about to take over their city. The escape was, of course, obviously very dramatic. 2 years later, they arrived in Sweden and began building a new life. This year marks 10 years since they came. Matthias is now one of the top students in his high school, aiming to become a doctor, loved and respected by his teachers and classmates. And yet, today, he still sits in a detention center in my country. Christians in Iraq are considered second-class citizens. Despite having survived crimes against humanity and war crimes, they do not have equal rights under the Constitution. Last week, new guidance was issued by the European Union Agency for Asylum. According to these guidelines, asylum seekers with links to ISIS may be granted protection in the absence of individual evidence of war crimes. Okay, fine. At the same time, Christian asylum seekers from Iraq and Syria are being deported based on claims that persecution no longer exists in the same guidelines.
Just two more seconds.
Asylum systems should be thoroughly reviewed. Independent audits are needed to assess the role of subjective judgment and lack of knowledge in asylum decisions. Given the limited time, I urge you to read my op-ed in Newsweek from yesterday. My suggestion is that we implement a new system based on AI-supported fact-finding tools under strict human oversight, where everyone has the same opportunity to be granted asylum. Thank you.
Thank you. You got a standing ovation. I don't know that that happens here very much, so that's good. You know, the last question I want us all to weigh in on is what we do now. This is a really heavy topic, and we're talking about millions of people around the world. Again, from China to Afghanistan to Iran to Vietnam to Nigeria. Really, there's no corner of the world that is left untouched, from people who have to flee because of their faiths, because of who they are. But even in these darkest times, when solutions are becoming harder and harder to find, there are points of light. And so I want us to talk a little bit about what we in this room and those who are watching can do, what the next steps could look like. And I will take moderator's privilege to say, for example, it would be my recommendation that every single person in this room who has access to Congress this week talks about restarting the Lautenberg program, for example, a program that brings religious minorities, including Jews and Baha'is and Mandeans, to the United States. But it's been put on pause because of the refugee ban to this country. So these are very concrete things that have helped save thousands of lives, but are now on ice. And so that's my recommendation. But Catherine, I'm looking at you first. What about you? What would your recommendation be?
Well, the extraordinary reach of faith communities, I think, opens so many avenues. And if there is one common theme among the world's religions that really is a powerful drive, is the care for the most vulnerable. This call to leave no one behind that we heard people talking about yesterday. And the other aspect is the degree to which it combines mind, heart, hands, and soul. In other words, you see all of the different dimensions reflected in the way that people are part of faith communities and their moral voice, their prophetic voice. So the challenge that I see particularly is combining the vision, the moral voice with the experience, but also what you can call fire from above. In other words, the powerful leaders that we have heard just now with the bishop and so many others who have a prophetic voice that really put their hands on everything, but also those at the community level. So that's the fire from above, but also the fire from below. And what sometimes is missing is the connection. Finding ways to link both the words, the message, the knowledge, the facts about protracted refugee situation and the plight of children with the complexity of the situations that's driving each of these situations, combining that with the compassion and care that you see in so many programs, each family welcoming, caring for people, constant drives for the equipment that people need. So I do think that this question of using this prophetic voice, but also this rich experience of welcoming, of care, the compassion, and bringing together this vision against all the complexities of managing plural societies in 2026 with the realities of how we live each day. So I think there are many programs at many different levels But I think we do need to see, as people who are able to step aside, this link between what is at the highest level of human inspiration and vision with the way that people live and the way they care for their neighbors.
Well, that's inspiring, and it made me think about what we at Highest call welcome circles, and this is not specific to the American Jewish community, but that's been key to what we've been doing. But synagogues, mosques, churches around the country who have been helping to welcome refugees since the beginning of the program and even more intensely in the last several years. And so really taking what you're talking about on high to practical implementation. Naz, what about you? What would your recommendation be for what we should be doing?
Faith-based actors, religion or belief communities, and champions around the world have been critical in provision of essential services, IDP camps, refugee camps, or those we know in our neighborhood who are displaced and their rights are being violated because of that. I want you to put up your hand if you know of any religion or belief whose founder was born and died in the same town or city, or who didn't ask for the good news to be spread by crossing boundaries and movement. Do we know of any religions who haven't benefited from freedom of movement? Is there anyone here who lives in the same town or city as they were born? So we need to connect with the challenge. All of us are beneficiaries of freedom of religion or belief on the move, and of being able to move, to have different experiences in the world, to have occupational experiences, and to have been able to escape discrimination or persecution on grounds of religion or belief. Yesterday, it was said by Pastor Paula McCain that we start with the norm of everyone should have freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Why is it that we have bracketed out those who are on the move from everyone? How can we champion freedom of religion or belief and exclude it to IDPs, refugees, or devalue it or give it less worth if they are migrant workers or members of their family? Everyone is everyone. Why is it that we are conceding this right to political forces around the world? Why is it that we concede that, we allow our children to be infected by that prejudice that, yes, religious liberty, freedom of religion or belief, but everyone is not really everyone and is not on an equal basis? So we need to connect with it. We need to recognize that manifestation of religion or belief often, as Catherine said, includes the norm of hospitality and welcome, and we should be able to practice that, and we should stand in solidarity with one another to enable it for everyone, everywhere.
I'm not going to forget everyone is everyone. That's going to stick with me. So Nuri, you have just a couple of minutes to be the last one to tell us a little bit about what your vision is. How do we move forward? What can people do?
I will follow up on Naz and ask, is there anyone in the room who actually believes that the awareness or the attention religious freedom gets in both legacy media but also modern media like podcasts is fair? None, not one person. So then it's up to all of us to actually raise that awareness and do it in a new modern way where religious persecution but also the situation for IDPs and refugees in camps all over the world gets the righteous attention.
Thank you. Are there any things that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure that we mention? Anything that about your work right now? Any way you want to wrap this up? And it's okay if not, but I just want to make sure you have a chance for any closing remarks, any one of you.
Catherine?
I think the extraordinary diversity of what different communities are doing and saying, and they're people living their core beliefs of being a neighbor, of reaching out and caring.
Yes.
We need to know better. We need better, in a sense, we need better documentation and more of the stories.
Absolutely.
Love to your fellow human being.
Coherence.
Yeah.
The photos we see of those we champion here as those who are persecuted on grounds of religion or belief, they sometimes need to leave their home. If they're in IDP camps, we tend to forget them. If they cross the border, suddenly we securitize them. It doesn't make any sense.
Thank you. Well, with that, I just want to thank all of you. This is a full room, or an almost full room, pretty early in the morning, and so we really appreciate that. And again, just taking moderator's privilege, I really do urge all of you who are going to Capitol Hill this week or will be speaking with the administration to raise these issues, to make sure that they're hearing from you about the importance of providing protection for people who are on the move because of their religious faiths or lack thereof, and persecution because of who they are and what they believe. So with that, we'll say thank you very much.
Joining us on stage, Rushan Abbas. Ms. Abbas is a Uyghur activist and an advocate for human rights and freedoms for the Uyghur people. An American citizen, she has experienced China's transnational repression firsthand in retaliation for her advocacy.
Good morning, everyone. I am an Uyghur American, also sister to a kind and caring woman who has been in China's detention unjustly for the last 7.5 years. Since 2018, the Uyghurs are facing full-fledged active genocide with China's mass detention, criminalization of our religion, culture, and the language. And the Uyghur women are facing forced sterilizations, forced abortions, and forcibly marrying to Han Chinese men. With that, the Uyghur population dropped down to 0% in some of the majority, the Uyghur populated areas. And Chinese embassy in the United States publicly celebrated those genocidal efforts by tweeting and saying, Uyghur women are no longer baby-making machines. 1.1 million Han Chinese cadres deployed into Uyghur homes, live with Uyghurs and supervise and monitor their daily lives. While most of the men are sent to concentration camps or prisons or forced labor facilities, Uyghur women are subject to sexual abuse inside of their own homes. 1 million Uyghur children are taken from their families and sent to state-run orphanages to be raised as Han Chinese people with Chinese communist ideologies. And our mosques are being demolished. Chinese government is targeting all religious and cultural books, burning all of them, demolishing the mosques and the churches, or turning them into nightclubs. These are all so personal to me because I spoke about China's mass atrocities in September 2018 at Hudson Institute, one of the think tanks here in Washington, D.C. I exercised my freedom of speech. But just 5 days after that, my own sister, Gulshan Abbas, a retired medical doctor who was taken as a retaliation for my activism in the United States as part of China's transnational repression. She is not a political person. She's not even an active speaking in anywhere. Her only crime is being my sister. And this story is not isolated just for my families. My husband's entire family went missing since September 2017, 24 members. And all of my colleagues here with us, or all the Uyghur advocates in diaspora, they are also facing Chinese government's crimes, state-sponsored crimes of transnational repression. When I travel around the world speaking about China's crimes, I face all kinds of harassments, death threats, and intimidation, and people are following when I travel from continent to continent. They are using the digital platforms to dehumanizing us and the waging campaign of character assassination. Recently, I published a book called Unbroken, describing China's genocide. And then there are 2 fake copies published in the name of telling my story, but with all fabrication and the lies to just confuse people. This is how far a country goes to silence the people who speak out. Silence is the oxygen of the tyranny, and I refuse to be silent. We are going around the world trying to speak out. We are going around the world trying to raise awareness, to tell the world that this is not just the Uyghur story. This is a story of every Tibetans, Falun Gong practitioners, and Hong Kongers. Now Taiwan is at threat. Next, if we don't speak out, it will be all of us. So please join me and hold this barbaric regime accountable, not just for today, but for the world we are leaving behind for our children and our grandchildren, so they won't face an illiberal world. Please join me in this fight, like I'm fighting with my colleagues, my brother and my husband. Please, all of us, join me to hold China accountable, because we are all responsible for what happens next. Thank you.
Welcome to the stage our panel for Transnational Repression, How Authoritarian Regimes Target Religion and Belief Beyond Their Borders. Moderator, President, Freedom House, Annie Boyajian. NBA player, Nobel Peace Prize nominee, and New York Times best-selling author, Enes Kanter Freedom. World Wrestling Champion, President of HIWA, Sardar Pashaei. And United States Representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Mike Waltz.
Well, it's such an honor to be with all of you today to talk about this important topic with our extremely distinguished panel. We have a lot to talk about and only a little bit of time, so I'm just going to get us right into it. And to set the scene for folks who may not be familiar with what transnational repression is, it is when governments reach beyond their own borders using digital and physical tactics in order to silence exiled dissidents and members of the diaspora. Tactics include threatening messages and phone calls, threats against family members, arrests, assaults, deportations, even murder. Freedom House maintains a database of direct physical incidents of transnational repression, so assaults, kidnapping, assassination attempts, and we use only open source, publicly verifiable information because we don't have the capacity to vet claims on our own. And so this doesn't even include digital incidents. And we know what we have captured is really only a drop in the bucket compared to what is actually going on. And even still, globally, between 2014 and 2024, we have documented 1,219 incidents of physical transnational repression perpetrated by 48 governments. That is more than 20% of the world's governments in 103 countries, including here in the United States. And some of our panelists sitting with me have experienced that themselves. Some governments target specific religious groups or believers because they are perceived as a political threat. We see this in China, Central Asia, Egypt, India, Iran, and Turkey. There are also many religious believers around the world whose faith compels them to speak out against repression or take up roles as journalists, human rights lawyers, activists, political figures, and this then leads to them being targeted. The worst perpetrators of transnational repression in our database include the governments of China, Turkey, Russia, Tajikistan, Egypt, Turkmenistan, Cambodia, Iran, Uzbekistan, and Belarus. And this is actually a perfect segue to Ambassador Waltz, believe it or not. Ambassador, many of the worst perpetrators of transnational oppression, including the governments I just mentioned, but others as well, and governments that persecute and target religious minorities, sit on key UN bodies and are working together to actively shape the agenda at the UN and to target dissidents. From your vantage point, how do you think the United States and other democracies can work together to confront transnational oppression within the US system, even when many of these very actors are trying to manipulate that system to target folks?
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me today. Thank you for all the great work that Freedom House does in the fight for freedom all over the world, and just the fundamental basic rights that we all hold dear and that America has led around the world on now in the post-World War II era. Look, I get asked all the time. I'm a former congressman. I'm used to kind of being at a town hall where people ask very basic, fundamental questions from our bosses, the taxpayers, and I get asked all the time, what the heck is the UN good for? Why are we participating? Why are we paying a quarter of their budget? What is it doing for us and for them, frankly? And my response often is, yes, it absolutely needs to be cleaned up. It needs to be focused in a better direction. But under an America First agenda with a diplomacy first approach, we need one place in the world where everyone can talk, where everyone can come together, even those that we have fundamental and absolute disagreements with. And the interesting thing about New York is there's actually more embassies in New York than there are in Washington, D.C., because there's countries there that were treaty bound to allow access to the UN that we don't have relationships with, countries like North Korea, Iran, Cuba, and others. So that's one dynamic of engagement. But this administration has undertaken a review of a number of UN organizations. There are some that we're determined to get in there and fight and reform. And then there's others that we've decided just need to be defunded and need to be, frankly, kind of taken down and rebuilt. And the Human Rights Council is one of them. We are no longer participating. We are no longer funding that organization because of the dynamic you just outlined. Some of the worst and most egregious abusers are a member of that council and seek legitimacy from that council and frankly seek cover for much of the transnational threats and the TNR that they're engaging in. So what we're doing is bringing together like-minded coalitions and frankly pulling folks together in ways that we can work against and for these issues, but importantly, it serves as a platform for highlighting the abuses that I think you're going to hear about all day long. We recently had a gentleman that was arrested, detained, and tortured by the Iranian regime for 9 years. We also had Mahsa Ahmadinejad, and the fact that, case in point, exhibit number 1, she just faced her assassins in a U.S. court. They were recruited by the same Iranian operative that also tried to recruit assassins to kill President Trump. So I don't want to take up too much time on the issue because I want you to hear these amazing stories from Inez and Sadar, but I'll tell you, this is an issue that the United States takes very seriously. We are very concerned about it. We are going to engage in these various UN bodies, including the Security Council, where I and the United States have brought these voices so the entire world can hear. And by the way, when we had the Iranian dissidents there, the UN Security Council, it penetrated all the way into Iranian villages and gave those people hope that their voices were being heard, that their examples were being put on the world stage. But in other cases, we are going to use the power of the United States purse to defund organizations that are not living up to the basic elements of its charter, like the HRC.
I would really say throughout our time at Freedom House, we actually turned 85 this year, and really we have seen the point that you make, the importance of staying engaged and being able to have a venue where democracies can work together to push back against these authoritarian attempts to target individuals, keep folks away from the UN, try and prevent victims of various crimes from being able to speak. So it's really excellent to have the United States and democracy still engaging in that venue. This is actually a great transition. You were talking about Iran. Sardar, you are a world-class wrestler, medalist, national coach from Iran, and also proudly Kurdish. Part of the reason you were forced to flee Iran was for speaking out about discrimination against the Kurdish people. Your story very powerfully illustrates how ethnic persecution and transnational repression intersect. And obviously we've seen that quite a bit from the Iranian government. You were barred from international competition and forced into exile, and your family is experiencing ongoing intimidation and retaliation. So is your community. The government of Iran has been particularly brazen in the way it has targeted perceived opponents, and I know we up here are all friends with Mahdi Ahmadinejad, who the ambassador referred to, and are thrilled that the government has attempted to assassinate her a number of times, and we're very glad that the latest attempt did see a conviction. But Sardar, based on your experience, how do you think Iran and other authoritarian regimes are using transnational repression specifically to try and silence ethnic minorities? And then related, but a little bit different, in case we don't have time for a second round, as you look at everything that's happening in Iran today, what do you think ethnic minorities, especially Kurds, want to see for the future of Iran to end this targeting of folks at home and abroad?
Thank you so much, and I'm honored to be here. I think Iranian regime, from the first day, they see two big enemies. First, women, and second, minorities, ethnic minority, religious minority, and that's why for the past almost half a century, they put the maximum pressure on them. Inside Iran, they lash women, force them to compulsory hijab. For ethnic minority, religious minority, using death penalty, execution, and outside of Iran, targeting them, assassinating them, as Ambassador mentioned, that even on US soil or European countries. And but I think the most immoral tool that Iranian regime, which claims moral authority, use is hostage taking. It's when they go after your dear one, arrest them, torture them. It breaks you in two places. First, they torture the dear one in solitary cell to break them, and second, they try to break you thousands of miles away from your home. It happened for me several times when they arrested my sister because she opposed child marriage, and also my younger brother Saman. He's a world medalist wrestler. They tortured him so bad for months that he got brain trauma. He could not sit for 21 days. Still in his solitary cell, they were questioning him while he was laying back to send you this message that whoever stand up against supreme leader, this is the price that they pay. They take your loved one. They even take your passport, your sport. For me, I was like a musician that played music all of my life, and suddenly they came and they broke your instrument. But when it's about, in this difficult time that Iranian regime, slaughtered tens of thousands of people, and they might fall any moment, I see that what Kurdish people, ethnic minority, women are looking for, what is the future they want. I think we have monarchists, we have Islamists, and now the nation is ready for democracy. In monarchy, the king owns the land and the people are subjects. In Islamist, it's the imam who is the representative of God on earth, and everybody must obey. But I see now the younger and educated generation, they don't want to be ruled by a supreme leader, they don't want to be ruled by a king, they want to be king of their own destiny. And I think, back to your question, what do we want from the future of Iran? No monarchy, no Islamism, it's no Sharia law, its secular democracy.
I know we at Freedom House are so grateful for your bravery and the bravery of your colleagues who continue to fight for freedom. And as a Turkish American who advocates for freedom around the world, you have spoken out quite a bit, not just about what is happening in Turkey, but around the world, including what is happening to Christians in mainland China, to Uyghur Muslims, to folks in Hong Kong. And you are doing this not just as a quiet citizen, but as a high-profile NBA star, now a best-selling author. And you have made some pretty powerful enemies as a result. You yourself have experienced transnational repression directly from the Turkish government. This has included threats against your family and an effort to silence you from abroad. And the Turkish government actually conducts quite an aggressive campaign of transnational repression, pursuing folks in at least 39 different countries. The Chinese government conducts the most sophisticated, global, and comprehensive campaign of transnational repression, even more thorough than the Turkish government, not a distinction that we admire. In our database, the Chinese government is actually responsible for 22% of all of the cases that we have tracked. And the PRC is not happy with you either. From your perspective, how do authoritarian governments learn from one another when it comes to silencing critics? And this can be through transnational repression, but also I know you've seen quite a bit of economic and political pressure. What does your experience tell us about the risks faced by outspoken individuals like you, especially those advocating for religious freedom?
Right. Thank you for having us. I'm really honored to be here. They definitely do learn from each other. I think I want to start with Turkey and go to China. So I think the hardest thing to go against a dictatorship, what your family has to go through, you know, and it was not easy. You know, I started to speak up about the dictatorship in Turkey. I haven't seen my family 11 years. They put a bounty on my head and they put my dad in jail. But, you know, people knows my story because I play basketball in the NBA. The reason I am still so outspoken about the problems that are happening in Turkey, because Turkey plays a very strategic role in the Middle East and in Europe. But right now there are thousands of innocent people, innocent journalists, innocent people, housewives, and actually almost I believe 1,000 infants are in jail waiting for help. And every time I have a conversation with, you know, some of the you know, lawmakers, they said, well, we know what's going on over there, but, you know, it's a NATO ally. I mean, them being a NATO ally makes things different, but while them being a NATO ally, they don't act like a NATO ally. I mean, Erdogan goes around and shakes hands with people like Putin. He goes around and shakes hands with, like, you know, people in Iran, the president of Iran and all that stuff. But I was like, enough is enough. We gotta do something about that. But when you're talking about China is a different beast. I mean, me and Mr. Walls, you know, been working on it for a very, very long time. But when I started to talk about the problems that are happening in Turkey, NBA really supported me. They have my back. It was amazing. I felt so comfortable because I was like, the whole NBA is behind me. But when I started to speak up about China, that support was nowhere to be found. And it's so interesting because no one is talking about the problems that are happening in China, unfortunately, and everyone is scared about it. And when I got fired from the NBA, I started to do research, and I realized that NBA is not the only one. You see the Hollywood, the academias, and big tech, and even some of the people in Congress and local Congresses. Wall Street is being run by the Chinese Communist Party. I was like, we got to do something about that. But they definitely do follow their footsteps and each other. But I mean, like I said again, we got to do whatever we can to take concrete action against these dictatorships. Because condemnation, when you condemn a dictatorship, they do not care at all. So that's why I feel like we have to push our lawmakers, we have to push our Congress and senators to, put sanctions on these, maybe use Magnitsky sanctions on these individuals to take some actually concrete actions, because while you're condemning those dictatorships, they do not care at all. So that's why we got to do whatever we can to put pressure on these governments to release political prisoners around the world. So.
Freedom House worked quite a bit on targeted sanctions legislation, and that is actually one of the things we hear from folks on the ground and folks who've been forced to flee over and over, is how effective that can actually be in changing behavior. You talked about one of the hardest things for you being the pressure that your family members experienced, and the technical term we track for that is coercion by proxy, and so many of the folks we work with very understandably talk about that being worse than anything that could happen to them personally, because having to muster the courage to continue speaking out. And Rushan, who you all heard from before this panel, she and her family have experienced so much of this, and the incredible bravery that she and others continue to exhibit is really inspiring. We are nearing the end of time, and so you talked a little bit about recommendations, but I want to dig into that a little bit more, maybe 2 minutes each. I'll do Sardar and then Enes. We at Freedom House have talked a lot about how the issue of transnational oppression, while very difficult, is one where the democracies are experiencing the same challenges, and therefore a lot of the solutions translate across countries. So we've talked about the need for a very clear definition around what transnational oppression is, the need to train government officials who come in contact with perpetrators and potential victims, the need to make sure that various government policies, whether it's law enforcement or immigration or anything else, not inadvertently enable transnational repression. But Sardar and then Enes, what do you think, if I forced you right now, one concrete action, whether it's government, international institution, or civil society, what is one thing you would say should be done to raise the cost of TNR?
I think transnational repression is not only about Iranian regime or authoritarian regime target its citizens, it's challenging the authority of the Western democratic countries too. So in the case of Iran, whenever there is a government administration that they are tough, that they are not play their game, that they know that there is a real consequences, Iranian regime stepped back, reconsidered it, and they did not play with the fire. Whenever they see administration weak or the leaders' government, they are not seeing any consequences for them. They got more aggressive, they targeted more, even they wanted to target the president of the United States. So I think this is a lesson for the policymaker, but if European countries, let's say, have done more enough, let's say, like suspending the financial agreement or expelling diplomats, we wouldn't have that many dissidents on their soil have been murdered.
Right. I mean, we already talked about sanctions and especially the Magnitsky sanctions, but I think I want to use my 2 minutes to just actually thank you guys, because it is important for, I mean, I look around the room, right? I'm sure there are so many people here who are affected by a dictatorship, or their families affected by a dictatorship, you know? So this kind of conference can be like, can look simple, but actually it brings people together. So that's why I want to thank you guys. I want to thank the IRF Summit by organizing this every year, because it feels like a family. You know, once you walk in, you see people from all over different colors, different religions, different ethnicity, different background, but we are all here for one simple reason: to fight against dictatorship and try to bring freedom into this world. So I think these kind of, you know, summits are so effective. It gives people courage and it gives people hope, and then it makes me feel like, oh my God, I'm not alone in this fight. I have so many people here that actually shares what I'm going through. So thank you guys for actually being here.
So Ambassador Waltz, last word goes to you, and you have done such a tremendous job throughout your career of making sure to look at the big picture and not treating fundamental rights as something to shove off to the side that's kind of a separate track issue. Why is addressing religious persecution and transnational repression so important to security and prosperity, not just in the United States, but globally?
That's a fantastic question. Before I get to that, you mentioned Rashid, her mother. It's an issue as a member of Congress that I worked closely on with her family. And we can't overlook the role that Congress has here. In fact, I hope to see a future member of Congress sitting
one day
up on this stage.
One day.
That can walk the walk and actually put in legislation. And if you look, whether it's in our defense bill, whether it's in Leahy vetting, there are a number of key touch points that are guide rails for how we engage the world. And Congress has a tremendous role. I'll just tell you from my perch now at the UN, obviously we have to deal with these countries not only from a multilateral standpoint, but even from a bilateral standpoint. Many times there are key American interests that we must, on behalf of the American people, engage with. But with the UN, it can truly be a global platform for gentlemen like these to tell their story, because what dictatorships often hate is sunlight and a spotlight in places where they don't want it, where the world can hear the human toll, the effect on families, the shattered lives that goes on as a result of these actions. For me, I'll tell you recently, it's not just from a human rights perspective, but it's obviously from a religious persecution. I did not have Nicki Minaj, one of the world's greatest rappers, on my dance card when I swore in as the UN ambassador. Didn't foresee that one, but this is a person that has 250 million followers across all of her platforms. People that may not think about or even realize the extent and the gravity of these issues. And in her case, her pastor is Nigerian. She was quite passionate about the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. I've served in Nigeria as a Green Beret, helped rescue some of those girls that are kidnapped out of schools, sold into slavery, sold as ISIS brides. We got some back, but I'll tell you, just from her responding to the president's truth, just by my invitation to have her at the UN, we've seen meaningful action to protect those poor people that are literally having their churches burned down, priests beheaded, people chased out of their homes because they call Christ their Savior. Those are the types of causes that we can serve as a platform for, and that I, as a UN ambassador, as the UN ambassador or the U.S. ambassador to the UN, am proud to stand behind. And I'll tell you, that is not just me. The president was the first president of the United States to host a global forum, all world leaders at the UN High-Level Week on international religious freedom. We should be, regardless of what you think of the politics here, we should be proud that President Trump has taken such a bold stand for everyone's right to worship as they choose. And just final point, I know we're over time. For us here in the United States, it's a matter of our sovereignty. This has always been and will always be a land of religious freedom. Our founding was on people fleeing religious persecution, and for any country to think they can attack someone here, intimidate, attack, in some cases even try to kidnap and take back to their own to their country is wholly unacceptable. We will not stand for it. We will stand for U.S. sovereignty in our borders right here in the United States, and for everyone's right to worship. And so I'm proud to sit on this stage. I'm honored to be with you both, and thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're so grateful to everything you all do to address this issue and for everything you all out in the audience do. So thank you so much, and please join me again in thanking our wonderful panel.
Joining us on stage, Sikyong Penpa Saring, political leader of the Tibetan government in exile.
Sorry. Excellent. Excellent. Am I speaking now? Okay. I didn't know that I have to speak immediately after coming on the platform. Good evening. We all have come from different parts of the world with varying degrees of religious repression. My name is Penpa Saring. I represent the Tibetan people. Since we have very limited time, I'll come to the point. The Chinese government not only forcefully invaded Tibet way back in 1950, now 76 years after the forceful occupation, the Chinese government is intent on destroying the identity of the Tibetan people. That includes the Tibetan language and Tibetan religion, the Tibetan Buddhist religion. In Tibet, religious freedom does not exist, just like our friends from East Turkestan, Mongolia, and others may have talked about. What we take for granted does not exist. Tibet has been a devout Buddhist country for the last more than 1,300 years. And we have been practicing Buddhism freely in that 2.5 million square kilometers, almost quarter of China, roof of the world. Tibet is also called as the land surrounded by snow mountains. Tibet is also called as the third pole. Tibet is also called as the water tower of Asia. So it has a lot of geostrategic, geopolitical resonance when you talk about Tibet. And then, of course, the religious freedom in Tibet, as I mentioned, does not exist. The number of monks and nuns that used to be in agencies. The Buddhist monks and nuns are educated with curriculum set by the Chinese Communist Party that does not believe in any religion. And surveillance is prevalent in all monastic institutions to watch, surveil, control the Tibetan monks and nuns with support from Silicon Valley to, provide surveillance materials to the Chinese authorities. That includes Tibetans who are being controlled and surveilled. So now, of course, the Chinese government wants to be responsible for recognizing the reincarnation of the 14th Dalai Lama. The Chinese government is not bothered about the living 14th, but they are more concerned about the yet to come 15th Dalai Lama. And they have passed a law as far back as 2007 called Order Number 5, which says that the Chinese government will be the final authority to recognize reincarnated lamas, what they call as living Buddhas. That includes, that is specifically aimed at the next Dalai Lama. So the Chinese government today has three positions. One is that they will look for His Holiness the Dalai Lama's reincarnation, the next reincarnation within China, which means the communist government is ordering the Dalai Lama, who is supposed to be reborn, not to be born outside Tibet. So His Holiness has been very clear. His Holiness said, I will be born in a free world. So if Tibet is not free by that time, His Holiness will not be born inside Tibet or inside China. He will be born outside, right? Outside Tibet or China, because it's He who has to be reborn, and it's He who decides where He has to be reborn to carry on His responsibilities. And the second position of the Chinese government is that through tradition, they use the golden urn, which was supposed to have been introduced during the Qing period, who are not Chinese. Qings are Manchus, in 1793. But there is no evidence of those. And when the Chinese government says by tradition, then I always point out to the Chinese government, there have been 8 Dalai Lamas before 1793. So what about those Dalai Lamas? Were those Dalai Lamas not chosen through the traditional means? Are those Dalai Lamas not Dalai Lamas? So the golden urn theory, China is misusing. They have been misusing for the last recognition of the 11th Panchen Lama. So the Chinese have their own Panchen Lama who will be misused again for their political gain to choose the next Dalai Lama, which is already happening inside Tibet by giving more prominence to the Chinese selected Panchen Lama. So the third position of the Chinese government is the Chinese government will be the final authority to recognize reincarnated Lama. A government that does not believe in any religion, how can they be responsible for the recognition? It's more like for the Christians, the Chinese government saying we will appoint the Pope. For the Tibetan Buddhists, His Holiness Dalai Lama is our Pope. Tibet and Lhasa are the home to Tibetan Buddhism, and Tibetan Buddhism is not only inside Tibet, but in that whole region, the Himalayas. So the US government has passed a law, several laws on Tibet starting in 2002, and this was amended to the 2020 US Tibet Support and Policy Act, wherein they have included the element of His Holiness reincarnation that also talks about sanctioning Chinese officials in future who will be responsible for choosing the next Dalai Lama on the orders of the Chinese government. And that was signed into law by President Trump. And in 2024, the Resolve Tibet Act that was passed by the Congress in July 2024 was signed into law by President Biden. And now I think it's time that if the Chinese government does not respond positively to His Holiness' peaceful gesture of resolving the Sino-Tibet conflict through negotiation, through dialogue, and a mutually beneficial solution that could be lasting, if it is not accepted by the Chinese government, then I think it's time for the US government and the governments of the free world to take a position that Tibet should be recognized as an independent state, because Tibet was historically an independent state. And if there is a declaration that's coming out after this summit, which I suggested to Ambassador Brown, and he has been very generous. I also attended the Article 18 Alliance conference in Czech Republic. There also they passed a resolution saying that the Tibetan people have the right to select their reincarnation according to their traditions. So I will end with this thought for world peace, because His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, turned 90. We are celebrating His Holiness' 90th birthday as the Year of Compassion internationally with different kind of programs. And His Holiness has always said, he always stressed on the oneness of humanity. Whether we are black, white, brown, yellow, whatever, we are all human beings with the same intellect. And His Holiness says, I am one among the 8 billion people in this world. Whatever title you have now or not, you are just one human being. As one human being, His Holiness says, my duty is to promote human values. Whether you believe in religion or do not believe in religion, His Holiness worked for many years to develop a curriculum called C learning, social, emotional, and ethical learning. And that, I think, is a very good seed for education all around the world. And His Holiness' second commitment, he always says, I'm just a simple Buddhist monk. I'm a religious person. So we are all religious people, or some don't believe in religion. That's also fine. But as religious people, we practice our own religion, but we should respect all other religions. That is how we live in peace with each other. I leave you with these messages. Thank you for the opportunity, the organizers, and Ambassador Brownback. And the Speaker Pelosi is also going to join with us after this. And thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
A warm welcome for Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi.
Good morning, everyone. This morning I have the honor of reading a message from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and as I do so, I come with a kadak from Sikhu Panta Serling and his beautiful remarks about succession. When I last visited the Dalai Lama with a bipartisan delegation led by Mike McCall of Texas, they tasked me to ask the Dalai Lama about succession. And he said, don't worry about it, I intend to live 12 more years. But nonetheless, appreciate very much what Tenta had to say. I come here also with beads given to me by the oracle from Tibet, from Dharamsala, and my bracelets that say faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. If you believe in the love and the goodness of people, that gives people hope. That is my message today. This is the message that I have the honor of presenting to you from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I'm pleased to offer my greetings to all those gathered for the 2026 International Religious Freedom Summit. I deeply appreciate your efforts to protect and promote one of the most fundamental human rights, freedom of thought, conscience, and belief. Religious freedom is not only the freedom to practice a particular religion, at its core, it is freedom of thought, the right of every individual to reflect, question, and choose their own beliefs without fear or coercion. This freedom of inquiry is essential to human dignity and to peaceful coexistence in our increasingly interconnected world. His Holiness goes on to say, although the world's religions are diverse in their traditions and philosophies, they share the same essential message of love, compassion, forgiveness, contentment, and self-discipline. These values are not intended only for followers of a particular religion. They are universal and relevant to every human being. It is deeply regrettable that religion has so often been a source of division and conflict. No genuine religion teaching promotes hatred or violence. In the 21st century, humanity must move beyond old divisions and learn not only to work together, but to live together. Cooperation among different faiths and cultures is no longer optional. It is essential to our shared future. His Holiness says, though, we are all members of one human family. Whether one is a believer or not, every person shares the basic wish to be happy and to avoid suffering. Common human values such as compassion, kindness, survival of humanity itself. Along with self-discipline helps us reduce destructive emotions and develop greater concern for the well-being of others. These qualities are equally important for religious practitioners and for those who may not follow any particular religion. He said, I've had the opportunity to meet some of you, including Ambassador Sam Brombach and Ms. Katrina Lantos-Sweat, and I hold their work in high regard. That could be an applause line. I sincerely appreciate the efforts of all those engaged in this field and specifically encourage the continuing commitment to protecting religious freedom while promoting mutual respect and a shared sense of responsibility. By upholding freedom of thought and nurturing universal human values, we can contribute to a more peaceful world and compassionate world. With my prayers and good wishes, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. As we proceed, I'm reminded in His Holiness's remarks that one time when I was railing against those who are opposing religious freedom, His Holiness got up next and said, "Let us all pray for Nancy so that we rid her of her negative attitudes." So I'm blessed by that. It is now my pleasure to welcome you all to join us in watching a clip from the documentary, The Wisdom of Happiness, which features His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Thank you so much.
So in our daily life, always keep thinking, I can make contribution. If I do, then other 10 people, 100 people, 100,000s, that's the way to do. So now, I think let us, this 21st century, be happy, peaceful, and climatically suitable. That's in our own hands.
Please welcome back your IRF Summit co-chairs, Dr. Katrina Lantos-Sweat and Ambassador Sam Brownback.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this final plenary of the Irf Summit, although there is a lot of fantastic programming yet to come this afternoon. 3 tremendous breakout sessions, and then we're going to have affiliated sessions in the afternoon covering everything from the G20 Interfaith Forum and so many other topics. Syria, it's going to be amazing. So you do not want to miss every bit of this extraordinary gathering and gain every bit of knowledge and wisdom you can. As we come to the close of this plenary of the 6th Annual IRF Forum, I am filled with gratitude and filled with inspiration for the road ahead. And I find myself thinking of one of my favorite monuments in the world. It is a monument dedicated to Raoul Wallenberg, a great Swedish humanitarian who, during the midst of the Second World War, was sent to Hungary, the country of my parents' birth, with one mission, and that was to try and save as many of the remaining Jewish citizens of Hungary as he could after the final solution had begun in that country. And both of my parents owe their lives to him, and so in a very real and direct way, I do as well. In front of the United Nations, there stands a monument, as I say. It's very simple. You might not even notice it. It's a little plaza that is paved with stones from the Budapest ghetto. And in the middle of it is a bronze briefcase with the letters RW on it for Raoul Wallenberg. Every time I see it, I get this powerful feeling that it depicts a moment when Raoul Wallenberg, rushing off on a mission of rescue to save some other people, maybe my own parents, was in such a hurry that he left behind his briefcase. And I look at that briefcase as a challenge to me. It poses a question: who will pick up the briefcase? Who will pick up the task of going forth to rescue, of reaching out to save, of standing between destruction and those who are helpless in the face of an oncoming wave of terror and danger? I hope, I pray, that this summit has perhaps filled you with the sense that it's your duty to pick up that briefcase, that responsibility for rescue, for speaking out, has been rolled onto your shoulders. Each of us, in our own way, can take it upon ourselves to step forward, to be the one who stands in the breach, who runs to the rescue. And it is my hope and prayer that that's the mission and the spirit and the determination that you will take with you from the IRF Summit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katrina. What a wonderful partner. She just does a fabulous job and puts her heart And she's got a brilliant mind and puts her heart into it. And it's just been a pleasure, it always is, to work with you. We do this operation with a very small staff, 2 people. And I'd like for you, if you wouldn't mind, to recognize them and a couple of others that have really leaned in and worked hard. This is a year-long effort to put this together. If you would join me, Manus Churchill. He's our lead executive director of this. Manus, come on out on the stage here. Carly Nance works with him in this project. She's new to the team, but does a fabulous job. Appreciate her. The programming, putting the programming together is a really, really difficult task because you got to balance so many interests and topics, and you got to make sure people are qualified and good on it. And the person that heads that up is Candace Bryan Abbey, and she's done a fabulous job of putting this entire program together. So Candace. Hopefully there she is, good. And she's assisted by Chelsea Hedquist, who works on this as well. The 2 of them just work brilliantly together on putting this programming together. Matt Goddard is my assistant that works on these things a lot, and so I really appreciate all of his effort. And then all of this is technically under-supported by, okay, how does the sound come on? How does the voice, how do people get introduced? You know, this doesn't all just happen. Cindy Nachman-Senders has been the person behind in her organization that's pulled all the technical pieces of this together. So Cindy, thank you. And all of these people hate to be introduced to you. They just want to be behind the scenes. Just let me do my job. And so this is an embarrassing moment for them. I apologize. They didn't necessarily dress for the occasion. They're wonderful, though. And give them another round of applause. They just do a fabulous job. Thank you all very, very much. I get to conclude all of it. This is just an amazing group. I want to make one real clear point to you, and I've been around a number of different movements around the world. I've helped with the initial anti-human trafficking work. I've done invisible children in Uganda. I've worked on a lot of these things, and one of the things I've noticed is that big movements are led by a small group of people. It's not millions gathered that will stop religious freedom. Stop religious oppression. It's a small group that will energize and move millions of people around the world, and you're that small group. Big movements are led by a small group of people. So we'll have 2,000 people gathered here in 2 days, and you're kind of going, how are we going to change the world with that? That's precisely how you change the world, with a dedicated group of people on fire, and the IRF Summit exists to put gas on the fire of religious freedom around the world. That's what we do. We put gas on the fire. We want religious freedom around the world, and you're the ones we want lit up, that's out there and moving this. And I also want to point out an inconvenient difficulty for us. We're the guys that hang around the playground with the unpopular kids. The ones that are picked on, the ones that are different, the ones that others look at and say, don't go near them, you'll get, they're different, they're odd. That's kind of who we hang out with, are the religious people in various countries, mostly in a minority position, and a lot of people disdain them, and they often get bullied and picked on. And most people kind of go, I just don't want to get involved. I want to stay away. But you don't. You're willing to get in the fight with them. And that doesn't mean you theologically agree with them. It doesn't mean that you think they're right on all the things, but you think they have a right to believe what they believe, and I'm going to protect that right. I'm going to stand up for it. I'm going to ride for that brand of religious freedom, for them, for everybody. But it's an inconvenient thing for us that's kind of who we hang out with. That's who our people are those. And I'm proud of them. And you know what the beauty is? Once you stand up to a bully, everybody gets freer on the playground. Everybody gets more freedom on that playground when the bully says, no, I'm not going to let you do that to the little kid over here. It's not right. You shouldn't do it. It's wrong. And we're going to take some hits in the process. You don't stand up to a bully without taking some hits yourself. But at the end of the day, everybody is freer. And that's what we're about. Katrina and I love you guys, all of you. You go forth. We love who you are, but we love particularly your passion and your purpose. We're in it with you. You go forth with our blessings and our prayers. God bless you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our plenary program. Breakout tracks begin promptly at 10:45 a.m. on the concourse level.